I am not a mental health professional, and this video is not meant to be taken as medical or mental health advice. This video analysis is simply for entertainment purposes only. The comparisons made in this video are my own opinions and interpretations. Take a seat, relax, and enjoy yet another psychological analysis of The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask could easily be described as a highly multifaceted, unique blend of narrative themes and emotional depth. Many people on YouTube have already done several psychological analyses of this game. I've enjoyed every single one of them. However, I have recently come to the conclusion that this video game might be one of the best examples of addiction. Skull Kid's relationship with Majora's Mask could potentially be categorized as that of an addiction. This video analysis in particular focuses on three aspects of addiction, which include perceived illusion of control, a lack of self-awareness, and existing underlying pain and vulnerability. One could draw conclusions that Skull Kid does exemplify each of these aspects in many ways throughout the game. Not only does Skull Kid demonstrate behavior that could be interpreted as both perceived illusion of control over his actual use of the mask, but also a lack of self-awareness and potentially existing underlying pain and vulnerability prior to him obtaining the mask. Each of these aspects are present in many individuals who suffer from addiction, and Skull Kid's behavior in The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask could be interpreted as possible illustrations of each of these aspects. In The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, Skull Kid exhibits behavior that could potentially be categorized as a perceived illusion of control over the mask itself. Researchers state that many in the midst of addiction display a lack of control over their addiction. This includes topics such as unreliable control, coined by Chandra Sripada in 2022, to describe one's inability to properly assess cost versus benefits of drug use, even when danger is a risk. And this includes the attempts of even cutting back on using. Skull Kid does indeed continue to utilize the power and destruction of the mask, despite there being far higher risk associated with using the mask, just to obtain what could be described as a high or intense state of euphoria the mask may provide him with. Not only does Skull Kid pose a risk to becoming further isolated and socially rejected, but he also appears to be completely oblivious to the fact that he would not be immune to the moon's imminent destruction of Clocktown and Termina. Another component of addiction related to the illusion of control is the inability to limit intake. When Tattle pleads to Skull Kid to return the mask back to the Happy Mask salesman, he responds with rage. perhaps due to being unable to bear the thought of no longer having the mask in his possession. This leads me to my final point on perceived illusion of control and addiction: wanting versus liking. Robinson and Berridge proposed a framework in 1993 that encompasses 4 major tenets of addiction, one of those being what they call incentive salience, or want. When the brain is hijacked due to addiction, the reward system in the brain becomes extremely sensitive to both the drug and any drug-associated stimuli. The individual no longer likes the drug, but wants it. This can be illustrated by the cutscene demonstrating Skull Kid initially stealing the mask. My theory is that even when Skull Kid first looks directly at the mask, it not only calls to him, but it likely gives him a taste of the power and euphoria he so desperately seeks after losing his friends. The loss of Skull Kid's friends, the Giants, potentially induces a lack of control, abandonment, and social rejection. Individuals struggling with addiction may genuinely believe they have power and control over their use and intake, while research findings have suggested that behavior in addiction demonstrates just the opposite. Skull Kid does exhibit behaviors which could support the idea his presumed addiction to the mask has indeed induced an intense desire to continue to use it, despite the negative consequences. This intense desire to wear and use the mask potentially creates a lack of control over the intake or use of the mask. There are also examples of Skull Kid's behavior that can potentially suggest a lack of self-awareness while he is in possession of the mask. Moeller and Goldstein in 2014 published research suggesting that impaired self-awareness in addiction can manifest as insensitivity to negative outcomes, dissociation from behavior, and social inappropriateness. Furthermore, Verdeo Garcia and Perez Garcia published research in 2008 suggesting that lack of self-awareness in addiction can also be seen as denial. Within their research subjects, it was found that there were alterations in the frontostriatal section of the brain, which plays a significant role in one's executive function and self-awareness. This was found within the subject group of individuals with alcohol and cocaine abuse disorders, in comparison to the same section of the brain in subjects without cocaine and alcohol abuse disorders. During the trip up to the top of the clock tower just before the countdown ends, we witness Skull Kid hit his best friend, Tail, in response to Tail trying to help Link prevent the mask's ultimate destruction of Clock Town and the land of Termina. When confronted by Tattle for hitting her brother, Skull Kid immediately detaches from his action and responds with, well, whatever. In his presumed state of addiction to the mask, he seems to fully disassociate from all of the destructive behavior he displays while using the mask. Finally, Skull Kid commits a myriad of pranks or inappropriate social behavior to nearly every character we come into contact with within the game, all while demonstrating behavior suggesting large insensitivity to each of these negative consequences directly related to his use of Majora's Mask. This could support the idea that Skull Kid's behavior could be seen as a lack of self-awareness as a result of his presumed addiction to the mask. Finally, there are several examples in the game to suggest that Skull Kid may have underlying pain and vulnerability, which could have significantly contributed to his decision to steal and begin using Majora's Mask. In 2009, Danielson et al. Published research in regard to the relationship between trauma and addiction. Their research suggests that lifetime exposure to traumatic events significantly increases the risk for substance abuse amongst young adults. It was also found that young adults with a history of PTSD, but no drug dependence prior, experience significantly higher 12-month incidence of drug abuse or drug dependence in comparison to young adults who had not been exposed to trauma. And within the game, there are indeed several events we later find out about Skull Kid in regard to his experiences prior to obtaining Majora's Mask. Each of these events he goes through could potentially be categorized as that of a traumatic event. We find out from Tattle that Skull Kid had experienced bullying by the kids in the Bombers gang within Clocktown prior to stealing the mask. And not only does Skull Kid experience social rejection from the Bombers gang, but he also perceives this to be the case in regard to losing his close friends, the Giants, when they have to leave. Finally, the Lost Woods, a very important area in the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, often has children who become lost in these woods. And because of this, they will eventually become what are known as Skull Kids. Each of these events can be categorized as traumatic events. Underlying pain and vulnerability has been identified as a possible risk factor for developing addiction, which contributes further to the interpretation that Skull Kid has an addiction to Majora's Mask. And in my opinion, I believe after experiencing each of these events, he possibly felt an overwhelming loss of control and lack of belonging. I believe the mask almost instantly offered something to Skull Kid that began to mitigate these possible present, intense, and unbearable feelings. Addiction is an extremely detrimental disorder that includes many components, such as perceived illusion of control, a lack of self-awareness, and potentially existing underlying pain and vulnerability prior to the development of it. The relationship between Skull Kid and Majora's Mask within this game, unfortunately, could be interpreted as an exemplary illustration representative of the devastating disorder that is addiction. I hope you've enjoyed this unique psychological analysis of Majora's Mask, and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next video. If you or someone you know may be suffering from addiction, please know that help is available.